Will mounting a file system read-only increase the lifespan of an SSD? Let's assume I have some data that once created, never again has to change. I have copied this data to an SSD and then remounted the file system as read-only and leave it that way from now on. Will doing so increase the lifetime of the SSD? I am looking for more than a simple yes. Reading does not matter, only writing to an SSD will cause wear. An answer shows up under this question which links to an article and the respondent mentions. It may be that if a page or erase block is not reprogrammed in a very long time, there is a, probably very small, likelihood some of the bits will revert to an unprogrammed state. Anything to say about that? Do you know of any studies that focus on such behavior?
Short answer. It depends on what you're doing. Exclusively reading from a SSD will still cause degradation of its memory cells over time. Mounting the drive read-only will prevent you from directly writing to it, but the drive's firmware will still produce background writes. But depending on your usage patterns, you may or may not have anything to worry about. Long answer. There are several types of errors outlined in flash error analysis and management. Erase error, caused by repeated program/erase cycles, writes, program interference error, data in one page is unintentionally changed while a neighboring page is being programmed, retention error, the charge programmed in the floating gate dissipates gradually, read error, data stored in a cell changes as a neighboring cell is read repeatedly. This paper is an interesting read, but going to that level of depth is probably outside the scope of your question, other than to say that exclusively reading from non-memory will not preserve the data forever. According to a presentation by Jim Cook at Micron, the cells should be erased and reprogrammed every 100,000 reads for MLC and 1 million reads for SLC. Slide 19. Slide 20. That said, these papers seem to be directed at low-level users of non-memory, for example, SSD firmware developers, and are not intended for end-user consumption. So I would suspect your drive's firmware already handles this transparently in the background. But getting back to the original question, does exclusively reading still cause wear and tear on the drive? Yes. How much? It's complicated. If you assume the firmware is rewriting a page's cells to new locations every 100,000 reads, and there are always plenty of available blocks, you have one write for every 100,000 reads. But on top of that, the firmware also performs wear leveling and other tasks, which amplify one logical write into multiple physical writes. In practical terms, you probably don't need to be particularly concerned unless the drive is nearly filled to capacity and you're constantly reading from the entire drive. But if you are reading from the drive nonstop, keep a close eye on the smart table for a month to get an idea how quickly your read patterns are causing background writes. And, of course, always make sure you have multiple backups.
Basically yes, but the extended answer is not forever. The data on an SSD, the electrons, which make up the bits, is isolated so it does not leak out, but if the data on the drive is subject to radiation, including magnetic waves or other electronics, the electrons stored in the bits will change state, thus damaging the stored data. However, this is an extreme case. Data on a SSD should be safe for years, if not decades.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.